Okay.
That's
All right. Thank you. Thank you. Hi, I'm Darriel Harris with the Baltimore Food and Faith Project. And the Baltimore Food and Faith Project is housed under Center for a Livable Future, which is housed under Johns Hopkins University. So basically, our mandate is to work with faith organizations in the Baltimore area to make food more healthy, more environmentally sustainable, and more just. And when we say more just, we mean that it is that the people who are bringing the food to us are treated with respect and given a livable wage, and that good, nutritious, healthy food is accessible by pretty much equally across the board. So this is the kind of work that we do, and faith organizations have been pivotal. Have been pivotal in our partnership into making these things happen, and hopefully we'll talk more about it later.
Yeah, so I'm really excited to be here. I was here earlier this morning, and I was really blown away by some of the really great discussions that we've had, and I'm looking forward to digging deeper tomorrow. The Center for a New American Dream works to empower people to shift their consumption habits. So, for example, we provide different tools and videos and webinars that will help people, give people inspiration about different ways that they can change their lifestyles. And actually, this morning when Bob Engelman was talking about looking at the oceans and all the debris from flip-flops, it just got me thinking about a discussion I've been having actually with my daughter in our household. Where last year she got her flip-flops for the summer. I think she had some wonderful hearts on them, and they've worn out, and so she was saying that she needed a new pair, even though the flip-flops are really, they're fine. And so I've been stalling all summer, and, she's been fine. So, that's one of the ways that in small ways we can think of changing our buying habits and moving away from the hyper-consumerist culture.
Hi, everyone. My name is Allie Silverman, and I am an attorney in the Climate and Energy Program at a small international environmental law organization called the Center for International Environmental Law. The name is great. We use the acronym a lot. It's CL because in various languages it relates to heaven and sky, and the sky is the limit is the way that we see it with regards to creating sustainable communities, not so much just in the individual communities that you have all been speaking about today, but across the globe, and how we can create an intersection between human rights and the environment. The parts of the lectures that I've heard today, it seems like this connection has been talked about a lot, and we talk about it every day in all of the work that we do on it, promoting environmental progress and safeguards and rights. And although it's not in our name, I think we're actually more of a human rights-based sustainability organization than anything else. I'm really looking forward to exploring this intersection with you all here, with all the discussions you've had up until now, and I'm looking forward to sharing thoughts on this panel. So thanks for having us.
Hi, my name is Andy Shallal. I'm the owner of Busboys and Poets, and I'm also the founder of Think Local First DC, which is the largest local business association. It's part of a larger umbrella organization called BALI, the Business Alliance for Local Living Economies, which is a national movement to go local and independent and really promote local living and local businesses. Busboys and Poets, as some of you may know, or I don't know how many have been to Busboys and Poets? Oh, wow, good. It's a place we call it's a community space first and foremost. We are at the cutting edge of of many issues, including food procurement and business practices. We are a place where it's a community gathering space. We're a place where racial and cultural connections are consciously uplifted. It's a place to bring people together from different races and different cultures and make them feel comfortable. We're a place where art, culture, and politics come together and intentionally collide. We create the atmosphere for that. And we're a place, we say, where we take a deliberate pause to feed our mind, bodies, and souls. It's a place where you can actually come and hang out for a while and not be rushed or feeling rushed that you have to leave. We believe by creating such spaces, it's part of a building blocks of a community, and we can start changing our communities in a positive way and certainly start impacting our neighborhoods, our cities, and in fact, the world. Thank you.
Okay, we're going to start our series of questions. We can start with Darriel, if you don't mind. Okay. What can urban agriculture and local food do for the development of sustainable communities?
Okay, so when I hear the term sustainable community, it makes me, I know you guys discussed this earlier, but I wasn't here. But so when I hear the term, it makes me think about a community that is thriving and almost self-perpetual. So when we talk about urban and local gardening, you know, when that's done, people become engaged in the food that they're going to receive, like how they're going to plant it, what they're going to plant, what they're going to grow, who's going to work that field, what kind of, what are the ways in which they're going to work that field, what kind of chemicals they're going to put in that. So when people get engaged in that, then they become stakeholders, and there's economic impacts, there's health impacts, obviously, and it kind of uplifts the community. The garden can really be a space a lot like Busboys and Poets, where people are coming together, and there's a lot of diversity in terms of culture and religion and thoughts and all the different things that make us people. So when we do urban gardening, it's really a community connector, and it connects us around something that is positive.
Thank you. I actually have a question to follow up with Andy, sort of on the same page. But what role do you see local business and food playing in a sustainable community?
Well, I have to also, echo what Darriel said. Food is such an important part of life, obviously. Everybody eats, most of us eat several times a day. So we have a huge impact on how we get our food and how we serve our food and all the elements that go with it. But more importantly, I think, I once asked Michael Pollan, who wrote The Omnivore's Dilemma, I said, you must be asked a lot about food. What is your favorite food or all that? And he said, well, the reason why I wrote the book had really very little to actually do with food. It had a lot to do with the people that create the food, that make the food, that actually work the fields. And that's what really inspired him to write the book. So it's really, I think oftentimes when we think of sustainability, we don't think in terms of people. We think in terms of water and the climate, the earth. And as far as I'm concerned, those things will be fine. Like the earth will take care of itself. It takes care of itself every single time, and it reminds us who's in charge. We are too self-centered, too anthropologically centered, and we think in terms of it is us who is really making the difference. But it's really not, for me, it's not about the earth and about the food and about all the things that you create. It's about our connection to one another. And I think what the whole idea of sustainability is, for me, it's how are we connected as human beings to one another. And that's really what creates sustainability in my mind. Everything else kind of falls in place once you create that. But I do believe that food, certainly, is a major building block in connecting us together. And certainly if we can take care of the way we plant our food and we gather our food, we distribute our food, we can learn to take care of one another far, far better than we have been.
Great, thank you. Allie, I'll go ahead and ask you a question, actually. Would you please describe the sustainability movement in other countries, and how are they similar to and different from sustainability movements in the United States and locally?
I think that's a really good question. Just so I have a sense of the audience, who has been outside of the United States before? Okay. and the panel and everyone. Okay, so that's great. I mean, it's really important, I think, to have a sense of what it is like beyond our borders, because as Jackie pointed out, there are a lot of environmental justice issues and a lot of sustainable issues that happen in our own country. In addition to what happens here, around the world, they're dealing with similar concerns related to the right to water, the right to health, the right to food, access to information, the right to be a decision maker, the right to participate. All of these different rights are ones that are more connected, I don't know about more, but are very connected to the communities that are focusing on sustainable development around the world. So it seems like those who are participating in this conference care about what they can do on the individual level here in the United States, maybe abroad. What kind of communities can you build? A lot of our partners, a lot of the communities that we work with globally, a lot of the civil society organizations, a lot of the governments that we work with, they're either responding to a development project that is taking away their various rights to access their various communities that may be displacing them, or they're responding to the fact that their communities, their environments are changing as a result of global climate change and other environmental problems. So to answer your question more specifically, what do they look like? They're very similar to what we are dealing with here. They're just thinking, there's a little bit more of a connection to either life or death or culture than perhaps happens here in the United States. Although in the United States, we have a melting pot of different cultures from around the world, including those here. So I think it's important to note that there are a lot of similarities and that there are differences too. One important one to note is that there's a lot more funding for civil society groups and even recognition for communities who are suffering these problems than there are in the rest of the world. And so a lot of the partners that we work with are building these movements without any financial support, and they rely on a lot of their own media attention that they can bring and themselves to make their movement possible.
Great, thank you. Anna, this one's for you. What types of societal, economic, and technological changes need to happen to foster environmental change?
Okay, well, the big societal change is we need to start living, like walking the walk. This morning when Laura was talking about, we have all this knowledge, everybody in the room here sort of agrees that something needs to change. But then the big question is, are we actually walking the walk? And I think oftentimes we run into this, what Scott was referring to as the time, money, knowledge conundrum, where, we have all the knowledge, but we just don't have the time to, jump in and try and figure out how we're going to make change. And so that's where New Dream has recognized that this is a challenge for many people. And we've also looked at the power of peer-to-peer exchanges and learning. And so we're trying to build a community of practice of people who are actually taking steps to make changes in their own neighborhoods and in their own communities. And so we put together a couple of guides. One is the Guide to Going Local that will address, a lot of the issues that some of the other panelists have brought up. And then we also have the Guide to Sharing, which is, it includes different step-by-step guides and videos and a lot of fun, really short, bite-sized steps that people can take and get more involved. And, the more communities are made up of people who are actually living the new American dream, the better it's going to be.
Oh, I didn't know if you wanted to show your slides, but we have them available.
Yeah.
So. Okay, cool. Okay, thank you. And we're going back to food, and Darriel, this one's for you. Just shifting back, it's kind of on topic. Let's see. So local and organic food production can sometimes be labeled as a hippie fad, and we want to know, are there benefits within the community besides environmental?
Right. So I think that the hippie fad label is probably not accurate. I mean, especially the communities I work with, a lot of the grandparents and the congregations that I work with, I mean, they grew up on farms, and they came north through part of the last people of the Great Migration. So So they were gardening. They were gardening, and they were doing urban gardening for quite a long time. But even if someone does call it a hippie thing, I mean, so what? If it's a good idea, then we can learn from a good idea, no matter who brings it to the table. And hippies they have good contributions also. So, but tell me the last part of the question again. I'm sorry, I forgot.
It's are there benefits within the community besides environmental? So
Right. So
benefit besides it being an environmental.
Right. So the benefits of urban gardening, I mean, one, they can be environmental, but then they can also be economical. So there's a congregation in Baltimore called Newborn Holistic Ministries that has a garden, and that garden they use to employ ex-offenders. So they have about 9 ex-offenders who are employed that are growing. They have about 9 hoop houses, and they have plans to have 9 more, and they want to do aquaponics. But they're employing ex-offenders so that to give them dignified work and work that allows them to support themselves and their families. So there's a lot more that you can do aside from environment, but environment is important, but also economics is important, also care of the land, and when I say land, I mean the community itself, the square blocks that the garden is on. People begin to care about that more and more as they see their food coming from that, and less trashing it, less allowing other people to just treat it any kind of way.
Thank you. Go ahead.
I just want to jump in because Darriel and I were talking earlier, and he brought up a really good point that he's just left out regarding health benefits. And he was explaining that in some parts of Baltimore, depending on which block you live, your lifespan is affected by as much as, did you say 20 years? So I'm going to let him say a little bit more about that and how food plays a role in that.
All right. Oh, thank you for asking me more. Yeah, so she's talking about the health benefits. I mean, so obviously there's health benefits in urban gardening. And in Baltimore, depending on which neighborhood you live in, your life expectancy can change drastically, up to 20 years at some points. It's the same city, same side of town, same street that goes between those 2 cities, those 2 block areas. Cucumbers, tomatoes, kale, collards taste a whole lot better when I grow them myself. And it gives me access to them, which right now, frankly, those neighborhoods, a lot of the non-affluent neighborhoods, they don't have access to that. All they have access to is carry-outs that don't care much about them nor the food and the health of the people who are consuming it.
Okay. Well, let's move on to Allie. I have a question for you. What is the link between human rights and sustainable communities, and how are you working to establish and maintain this link?
Great. Well, thank you for that question. It is the approach that we take as an organization in all of the work that we do. I mentioned that I work in the climate and energy program. CL has been around for 25 years, promoting just and sustainable communities, using the power of law to do that. So I realize there may not be that many lawyers here right now. Maybe some of you are thinking about using the law to promote sustainable communities. I think that's a really interesting and important option. Just to sidetrack, before I became a lawyer, I did a lot of very local community sustainable development work, both in the U.S. and abroad, using sustainable energy, everything from solar and wind, working on water access. And then it got to the point where I realized that in addition to helping the couple hundred people in the communities that I was living in or working in, that there's a real opportunity to use the power of the law and to change policies to affect not just hundreds of people, not just thousands of people or hundreds of thousands of people, but literally millions of people, which is the numbers of people that we have on the earth today. And so what we've been doing in climate and energy, in the environmental health program, in the people, land, and resources program at CL is that we use something called the rights-based approach. And I don't know if that just seems like 2 legalese or some weird way of saying, essentially connecting the rights that all human beings have to the environment that all of us live on and depend on for life. And so I think I think it's important to note that they are interlinked inextricably. It's only recently that it's been discussed and explicitly connected in international law and in actually national laws and constitutions. And it may seem like something that's very obvious to all of us who care about what a sustainable community looks like. It's not so obvious when there are other issues pulling at or vying for attention for governments or companies or even communities who have to deal with whether they should move, or as Jackie pointed out in some of her presentations, whether or not they should allow a coal-fired power plant in their communities because it'll give them jobs and other funding resources. So for us, it's inextricably linked. I work on a particular proposed solution to climate change that deals with forests. And I don't want to take too much time, and we can talk about it afterwards, but essentially the idea of what is the role of forests in not only combating climate change, but also promoting a sustainable community for those who already depend on the forest. And this link between those communities who have been protecting the forest, you can actually look at maps and see where forests are still standing, and it's where indigenous peoples and local communities who depend on those forests actually live. And so to come up with these international policies without recognizing those rights is not a way of coming up with a sustainable solution. And so what we do at CL, to answer your question, is that we promote these international standards, and they're called social and environmental safeguards. I like to think of them as like the helmet that you wear when you're riding down the street, or the elbow pads that you wear when you're rollerblading. It's not that you can't rollerblade without them, or you can't go biking without your helmet or your elbow pads, but you need them so you don't get hurt. And that's the approach that we take at CL, and that's what many other groups around the world and communities around the world are doing to make sure that this intersection between human rights and the environment is so explicit that when we come up with laws that will affect not hundreds of people but millions of people, that they're included. The one other thing that I would add, and I'm sorry if I'm taking so much time, but there's been a whole long line of international laws that speak to rights and environment, and oftentimes they're very separate. There's like those who are experts in human rights and those that are experts in environmental rights or or environmental law. And only recently has it been explicitly mentioned in various non-binding treaties, and now there's a special expert who in 2012 was given the assignment to look into what a right to a healthy environment would look like. And I mentioned that we already have rights to water, rights to life, rights to access to food. But this is one where the connection is being very clearly made. And I think regardless of all of the work that you are doing on the very local level or even in your own daily lives, think about whether or not should there be a right to a healthy environment. And if there should be, how can you use that in all the work that you're doing, be it here in Fairfax, Virginia, or be it in Honduras in Central America? So some examples to ponder over.
Thank you. Okay, well, let's pass it back to Andy. And on the topic of green businesses, I wanted to ask, what attributes would you say make a business green?
Again, I think going back to what I was mentioning earlier, I think employment practices are something that is oftentimes left out in the formula when we're talking about a sustainable business, when you're talking about a green business, what that means. For me, it really does create the quadruple bottom line. We talk about the triple bottom line, where we speak about the profits that you have to make in order to stay in business. We speak about the commitment to the environment and the commitment to the community, but we also have to have a commitment to the workers. And that is oftentimes left out. When we think of sustainability, we rarely think in terms of the person that's creating our food. We think of the cow, we think of the chicken, but we don't think of the people. Too many times, I think, in very, very nice chic restaurants, you have people that stay till the end of the night clicking the last glass of wine that they just spend $15, $20 on per glass, not knowing that their dishwasher who is washing that last glass may not have a home to go to. That's not a sustainable or green business, in my opinion. That has to be first and foremost in the structures that we use in order to determine what makes a sustainable business.
Oh, I have another question, and
yes.
May have answered a little bit of it, but how does being a local business tie into being a green business?
Well, I think, being local makes you more accountable. I mean, at the very basic element of that is being more accountable. I remember I used to be on the board of the Restaurant Association and for a few years, and I remember having this argument that went on and on and on forever, talking about whether or not to ban smoking in restaurants. And I was arguing, obviously, in favor of banning smoking in restaurants because, I have bartenders that stand behind the bar that have smoke breathed in their face all night long and of no, contribution on their part. They end up breathing the secondhand smoke and can get very, very sick with asthma and whatever else, other diseases we have. And the Restaurant Association was so intransigent about trying to change that law. I fought long and hard on it. In fact, I ended up resigning over it and over other issues that they were standing in the way of. And lo and behold, the law passed. At the time we were fighting it like Italy had gone smoke-free. Italy went smoke-free because the argument, Ireland went smoke-free, and the argument the Restaurant Association was saying is that, well, bars will close. I said Ireland went smoke-free, okay? How could you possibly make that an argument? New York went smoke-free, and D.C. was still fighting tooth and nail to stay a smoking city. And the fear was that every business was going to move out of the city and restaurants are going to close and, the apocalypse is going to come. And, that obviously was ridiculous. Now, anyone in this room probably of anybody who's younger than 30 can't even imagine being next to somebody sitting smoking next to you in a restaurant, let alone in a public space, right? So, a lot of times I think having that local focus or it makes you much more in tune to what the community really needs and what the community really wants. And I think it makes you much more accountable to the entire community. The Chamber of Commerce from the Restaurant Association's from the Business Association, any kind of business association is oftentimes aligned with the Chamber of Commerce. They make the decisions for many things, and they're often the go-to organization that if a legislator wants to put up a law or bring up some legislation or whatever, they go to the Chamber of Commerce. And us that work in local businesses never thought the Chamber of Commerce had anything to do with us or had our interests necessarily in mind. So that's why we started the organization Think Local First DC, because we thought that we need to have an alternative to the Chamber of Commerce, a association that really looks after the interests, not just from the business perspective, but from a holistic perspective, where you're taking all the elements of a community and being able to address them holistically, as opposed to a one-sided approach, an obstructionist approach to any issue that comes up, no matter how beneficial it may be to the community. So I know I went on.
Oh, that's okay. I actually was just wanted to follow up with what have you accomplished with the Think Local First?
Well, I think Think Local First now has over 500 local businesses in D.C. Again, it's part of a much larger umbrella organization. As I mentioned, the Business Alliance for Living Local Economies, which represents hundreds, thousands, in fact, of businesses throughout the country. And I think what the benefits of a local business association is learning from one another, learning best practices, and not seeing it as, the Chamber of Commerce handing you your marching orders, so to speak, in how to do business. A lot of times, I think, especially for people going to business, they oftentimes will look next door or the place down the street and try to figure out or read articles about what is an appropriate way to conduct your business. Oftentimes, those numbers and those figures come from the Chamber of Commerce. And Think Local, I think, has created a new paradigm in the way that we do business. We have best practices where different business people in different areas of business can come together and talk about what has worked, what hasn't worked, talk about more innovative ideas, talk about startups, talk about, in fact, even talk about leases, how to do a lease and what is an appropriate lease and when are you being fleeced by the landlord and speaking about these issues openly and honestly instead of keeping it secretive and everybody kind of stays in their little silo. And in the meantime, those who want to have less transparency are benefiting from that kind of lack of transparency. So it provides transparency for businesses. It provides opportunities for collective bargaining in a sense for businesses. We can actually have a bigger buying power to go get some green products for businesses. We can we've done for instance, many of the businesses went to clean energy. We worked with Clean Currents, which now actually is out of business, but we went to this other organization called Energate. I'm sorry? What's it called?
Brownswell.
No, it's a different one, but it provides wind energy basically. And we brought in, when we first started, that was one of the first things we did. We started with about 25 businesses, and we got everybody together to say, okay, we're all going to go green with our energy. So we collectively came together, created this sort of a co-op in a sense, went to a provider and said, yeah, you give us clean energy for a reasonable price and we'll bring all these businesses in. And sure enough, we did. And now all of our businesses are wind energy. That's been great. So having opportunities like that was important. I never thought the Chamber of Commerce spoke to me. I never understood what they did. I didn't know why they existed. And I really thought, you know what, I need to have people that I can sit in a room and feel a soulful relationship with, instead of just this relationship that makes no sense to me really from a business perspective. I want to have a business with a soul, not just a business that just works with numbers and a singular bottom line.
Thank you. That's really awesome. Okay, Anna, I have a question for you. Speaking of businesses and perhaps businesses without a soul, what aspects of consumerism most directly affect the environment?
Well, a lot of it boils down to advertising. And, the more aware we are and the more aware the more we educate our young people and our children and families about the power of advertising as it relates to overconsumption, the better off the whole community will be. And so I think a lot of it, advertising really drives the more and more consumerist culture. And I think, if we can create a shift, because if we all recognize that we have the power and we can all, through educating everybody, we can shift consumption habits, that in itself will influence the advertisers, and we'll see more sustainable advertising incorporated in the community as a whole. And so I think that's pretty much it.
Great, thank you. Okay, we're going to actually open it up to the audience if anyone has any.
On one
Yeah,
question?
absolutely.
I'm sorry to steal this from you all, but on the issue of consumerism and what individuals can do that actually affects some of the sustainable environmental movements around the world, is that think every little purchase that you make, be it clothing, be it food in certain restaurants, be it housing, bicycles, whatever it is that you're buying, it really does come from somewhere. So understanding where the products that you're buying comes from, in addition to advertising, I completely agree with you, is really important. But we're not dumb. Like, all of us here, we're all educated people. Even if you don't have education, this is where the right to access to information is so important. We want to know where our clothing is coming from. As I mentioned, I'm working on forests and climate change, and a lot of what is preventing forests from playing an even greater role in promoting climate change rather than degrading the climate is really because there's a lot of conversion of forests into oil palm plantations around the world. And there's oil palm that goes into lots of the products that we're using, both food and clothing and otherwise, not to mention the wood products that we get. Mm-hmm. And then there's the energy. Where are we getting our energy from? As Andy mentioned, where you choose, just be a smart consumer, care about it. Put your money and your time where your mouth is. And you don't have to be rich to do these things. It's like just taking a little bit of time to understanding. And I think that's you don't even changing your habits a little bit is the way to drive the consumer issue. So again, just to bring it to the global discussion, as I know you talked about earlier today, but how it fits into what a sustainable community looks like here, I think you really do look both close internally and then also externally and internationally.
Thank you.
Can I chime in on the consumerism issue? It's funny. I go to the restaurant sometimes and I see that somebody put the thermostat on 70, and we like to have it on 74. And I'll say, like, why do you put it on 70? He said, well, and the person said, well, I thought we use clean energy. Like it's okay to waste if you're using clean energy. And I think that's a mindset that really needs to change. Or for instance, we ask our customers when they come if they want a straw. At least we're supposed to. All of our staff are supposed to ask you if you want a straw. And for a lot of people, it's like, they say, well, these straws are made from recycled materials, so why do you care? Like, just use up as much straws as you want because it's made from recycled materials. I think there's this mindset that oftentimes that we think in terms of being green or being, having a sustainable, we don't think of over-consuming. And that's, I think, the issue. I went on a trip to Cuba and talk about being able to reuse every single morsel of whatever is out there. And I remember going out to eat, and we had a group of us that were eating, and they had served this, and they serve very reasonable portions, not too big, not teeny, but certainly not American size, that's for sure. And so everybody got this dessert, and it was like a really good ice cream, like a scoop of this really delicious ice cream. And one of our group members says, I really like this. I want to, may I get another one? And the guy said, no, you don't need another one. He told her that. He said, we in Cuba eat what we absolutely need and nothing more. So this is enough for you. I know you guys are Americans and you like to have 4 scoops of ice cream in order to feel satisfied, but we are not going to serve you 4 scoops of ice cream. You get 1 scoop, come back tomorrow for your next scoop. And so, there's a whole mindset, and like we as Americans are shocked. Like, what do you mean you're not going to give it to us? Like they were really serious. No, you're not going to get it. It had nothing to do with money, nothing to do with having to spend more. We couldn't have bought it. They were not going to serve it to you. Which I found really, really fascinating. Just the idea of portioning in this country is a little bit ridiculous.
Yeah. And sometimes just being like, well, do I really need this thing? You just kind of second ask yourself one time before you buy something. Can actually make a big difference. If you wait a while, your cravings go away, It goes away. Yeah, exactly. Does anyone have a question? Over here.
Andy, I noticed in your biography it says that you're an artist, and also Busboys and Poets obviously supports the arts a lot. How do the arts impact sustainable communities and communities in general?
Oh my goodness! I mean, I think the arts impact everything. For me, you begin with the arts, and then everything else falls in place. As far as I'm concerned, I'm an artist. I'm a painter, and I do murals. And art is really what motivates me, and what gets me to wake up in the morning, and what gets me to think, and what gets me to think in creative ways. And without the arts, I can't imagine being alive. I mean, it's just such an important part of our humanity. I think you can communicate a lot of issues through the arts that you cannot possibly communicate with a PowerPoint or numbers or figures. I think the arts can help us to understand one another, understand each other's humanity, and certainly find things much deeper than we ever imagined into our heart and soul. So the art is very, very significant in everything that I think we do as human beings. It's what distinguishes us from other living creatures, I guess.
Thank you. Does anyone else have a question? Over here?
One for Andy
in the
well.
front.
I know that you ran for office in D.C. I was wondering if you could elaborate on what motivated you and what you wanted to accomplish if you had.
As an activist, I've always shunned politics. I've always thought that politics were dirty and evil and bad. And I didn't want to be led by people who I thought were dirty, evil, and bad. And so I wanted to go in it to say, you know what, it doesn't have to be that way, that it's possible to have people that have really, really good intentions to come into politics. And I learned a lot. I learned that actually politicians are, for the most part, decent people. They work really, really hard. It's a very, very tough job. It's not an easy job. That's why a lot of people don't go into it, and it's a selfless job, I think, in many ways. It really is. We don't think of it that way. We think of politicians as being egocentric, whatever, and I'm sure they are, some of them. But I think for the most part, I think they are really people who care about their communities and want to make the world a better place. What motivated me is I wanted to make the world a better place. I want to make my city a better place. I wanted to make it more progressive. I was really upset about the pay-to-play culture that I think has been pervasive in the city, where developers have turned the city into a pawn shop, where they get free land and create amazing wealth out of that land on city coffers, on city backs, and not really giving a whole lot back to the community. Watching the amount of homelessness we have in the city, when we have a city that's awash with money, watching the amount of people that are suffering in the city when there's so much money in the city. We have a rainy day fund of $2 billion, and we have people that are homeless. We have or children that live in homeless shelters that end up actually living in homeless shelters, not just on a temporary basis, but actually living in a homeless shelter. We squander a lot of money in the city, and I thought, you know what, I don't need the money. I didn't do it certainly for the money, and I wanted to raise some of these issues and make sure that they're highlighted, not ignored. And I think I did make an impact. I think I did have the issues that I was speaking about were brought up. Issues of schools, homelessness, elderly care, all of those things I think were raised and were important. That's why I did it.
So like the example you told us where the service at your restaurant asked the customers if they want a straw. I know other places it's just provided. So even though like I don't usually use it, if it's provided to me, I just use it like subconsciously. So what other environmental conscious policies do you follow at your restaurant?
As far as you mean, what do we tell customers? How do we train our guests? Well, we were one of the first places that went completely green with all of our paper products. In fact, I remember when we opened our first place in 2005, around 2006 or so, we said, we're going to go entirely green with every paper product that we have inside our restaurant. And going around, and this is not a joke, I asked my paper product purveyor, I said, do you have green products? And they said, why do you want them green? Like the color, he thought. and that was really just 2006. This wasn't that long ago. And so I ended up having to educate our purveyors in order for them to have products. And then we were, like every time we would order like a box of to-go cups or something, it would take like 3 days or 4 days or 5 days, sometimes a week to get them because they never had them in stock. They never had that much of those products in stock. And sure enough, because of our size and our volume and the Think Local First community, bringing that together, we convinced the purveyors that it's to their benefit to carry these products. And they started carrying a lot more products, and now they can, you can call and get it with the next day's delivery as opposed to having to wait for it to be shipped from wherever. So those are the type of things I think that we were at the forefront of. Also, our cleaning products. I worked in a kitchen for some time, and I remember when you go to clean the grill at the end of the night, there's this chemical that you put on that grill, and the chemical, it fizzes and sizzles. Anybody worked in a kitchen and knows what I'm talking about? Yep. And it just burns your eyes and it takes away your fingerprints. It's good for like people want to steal shit. But so it really, after a while, your fingerprints disappear because it just eats through your skin, and it's horrible. It's horrible stuff. It cleans like hell. It's really good stuff, right? But it was very, very toxic and horrible. And so I was looking for a product that's not going to do that, because I didn't want to walk through the kitchen and look at my cooks with their eyes watering and their hands burning to try to clean the damn grill. That didn't make sense. And so we found a product, actually, that you can actually drink. You shouldn't, but you can actually taste it, and it's not going to eat away through your body. And so we have this product made from citrus. It's basically a citrus-based product that works, I have to admit, not as good as the other crap, but it certainly does the job, and it does it harmlessly. So all of our cleaning products, we don't use Windex on our windows. We use, green materials. All of our products are products that you can actually touch your skin with and not get harmed. So those are really real key and very important elements, I think, is the cleaning products, which restaurants use an awful lot of. Our carpets, which we clean on a regular basis, are cleaned also through a clean process, not through a dry cleaning, whatever that chemical is they use in dry cleaning. We don't use those. So we really have to shop around. Now it's easier. It's easier to get those products, and they're plentiful. The prices are still, unfortunately, higher. It's higher price to be able to go green. It's much more expensive to use a recycled package than it is to use styrofoam. Happy to say that DC went styrofoam free just a few days ago. So we banned styrofoam in the city. Virginia is a long ways behind, but someday Virginia will get there too.
All right.
Oh, I'm allowed to ask questions. So this is mostly for Allison, but I think a lot of people could answer it, and it's kind of a tough question, but it's one that I think about a lot and discuss with people. So I've done some travel and seen people in developing countries, been lived in other communities, and I see how happy they seem with very basic lives. And we are very obsessed here with wealth and affluence and having things. And we're sometimes convinced that much of the world is convinced, and we're convinced, that everyone kind of should have that same level of affluence, and that we should all have the same quality of life, and that all these things are needed to have a high quality of life. And so I'm wondering, I think that you've done a decent amount of travel from your career and your experience. I'm wondering what your thoughts are on that, on basically happiness and how it's connected with wealth, and where do we reach a point where we can actually be happy and have a sustained life? How much do we need to reach that point, and then where do we end up kind of going the other way?
Well, I definitely don't want to be the only one to respond to this question. It is a really tough one, and there's no one answer. The one thing that I will say, I'll give one example. I did a solar energy rural electrification project in Panama, and this was a very, very poor campesino community, which meant that it didn't have, indigenous peoples are marginalized throughout the world, but they have also of late they have achieved recognition of global human rights. Sometimes in some countries, the communities that don't have any kind of indigenous ties actually don't have even those basic rights, even though we all share the basic human rights that I mentioned earlier in the panel. And so this community was quite poor. It didn't have electricity. I did a needs assessment to see why they wanted electricity, because through various other, I won't go into the details, but basically the one thing that they felt like they did not have that everyone else in the world seemed to have was electricity. And asking around, literally going from house to house, visiting 250 households, which was about 900 people, what do they want electricity for? They wanted it for an ice cream machine. Literally. And I think because someone may have heard about an ice cream machine through the work that they were doing in Panama City. And they thought, it's so hot in Panama, I want some refreshing ice cream, or I want my soda to be cold all the time. Only sometimes when there's ice that comes in, that's been trucked in from miles away, is there cold soda. And so I think it's interesting because through various iterations of the project, we came to realize that, well, maybe we don't really need cold ice cream, but maybe it would make us happier. What other things would we benefit from if we had electricity? What things do we not have now that we think could improve our lives and make us happier, as you put it? And in the end, the community decided that what they actually wanted was lights on the school and actually what they call, it was essentially a TV and a VCR, which enabled a community that only had primary school education because of some crazy law in Panama that said you can only go up to primary school if there was no electricity, because they did a lot of secondary education by tele-education programs. So you'd get a video and it would show you, and then once a week a teacher would come in and facilitate discussion among students, and that was your high school essentially. And so what the community realized was, well, they were happy enough right now if you ask them, oh, ¿cómo estás? Así, así, everything is okay. They never actually said that they were so happy, though they had enough food to eat, and that's what they focused on. In the end, we did this community project where we created a project that put solar panels on the school that did two things. One, it created a secondary school in the community, and two, it created a night school for adults who only had a primary education because of the law that I mentioned, and that also because they had to tend to their fields all day, and they didn't have time during the daylight hours to actually study and read. And at night, I don't know if anybody's tried to read, even when you're camping, by a headlight. Even if it's LED, it's not that easy. You tend to fall asleep, frankly, while you're doing it. So I don't know if this answers your question directly, but in the end, now the project's been running for about 10 years, and that means that there are two generations of people who have a greater education. Adults are better well educated, can help their kids with their homework, and nothing really has changed. The houses still don't have electricity. I mean, I went back 4 months ago to check in because I care very much about this community, and I think they're a little happier because knowledge can bring happiness. I think that's what they would say to someone who, worked with the community to see something through that they wanted. But I think happiness, as we've all discussed here on the panel, has to do with the community that you create amongst people, and then making sure that the resources that you depend upon are available for you to use. And so some of the happiest people that I know are ones who probably don't make the most money and spend a lot of time focusing on community. Those people that I know have a ton of money and work really hard, they end up needing to go to doctors to make them feel healthier physically or mentally, or they buy more things to make them feel like they are just achieving in this world. And so it's not to say that those people are wrong. I feel badly when people have to buy their way buy their way to happiness. I think that there are other ways of doing that, and consumerism certainly isn't the answer. The ice cream machine wasn't the answer for this community when we actually sat down and talked about it. It was really what electricity could actually mean for the betterment of their community to make them happier. So I hope others have other examples or other suggestions.
I have something to say. I've traveled around the world also, and I've lived overseas, and people often say, this community looks so happy, but yet they're without some of the basic, what we would consider basic necessities of life. And then, of course, you work in urban cities like in Baltimore. Some people who are kind of outside, sometimes they say, oh, look, the person in this community, that's quite a depressed community. The person from the outside may come in and say, oh, the people in that community, they're okay. They look happy. And there's a famous moment where Nancy Reagan is looking at a depressed situation, and she says the people are looking happy, but in fact the people were in need of some basic resources. So I mean, people, whether you're in need or whether you have plenty, people can laugh and dance and enjoy and have good moments, and that can be pervasive, and it seems like happiness, and it is happiness. But it's not to say that there isn't some other things that they would like to have. There isn't some other basic necessities they would like to have. So I would just caution on the perception of happiness and equating happiness with having enough. But then I would kind of echo what she said and say that it seems to me that people are happy when they're able to provide what they need to provide to their loved ones. So if I'm in a village somewhere in a developing country, and my children are able to get an education, my children are able to get to a doctor when they're sick or get food, then a lot of times that mother is happy. And if I'm raised here in Fairfax County, and my children go to a good school and they eat well, then that probably also makes me happy. So happiness seems to be the connectivity to other people that we're around and not necessarily outside things.
I think we also have to go back to the idea of measuring happiness. I think a lot of times if we don't measure it, we really don't pay attention to it. I know that, for instance, not just happiness, but quality of life and the way we function in a community. DC, for instance, if you look at Forbes magazine or Business Week or something like that, comes up first in many, many metrics. It's the first in bicycle routes. It's number one in highly educated people. It's number one in beautiful homes. It's number one in so many in wealth. It's got a lot of number ones, but yet at the same time, it also has the highest dropout rate in schools. About 60% of kids drop out in schools in some communities, for instance. We have the highest child hunger rate than any other city in the United States. It's hard to imagine. We have the highest number of homeless people per capita. So all these numbers, so if we also have AAA bond rating. Our budget looks really good. For someone from outside, from Wall Street, they love us. Wall Street loves us. So it tells me that if Wall Street loves us and we have all these problems, we're not measuring the right things. We have to start measuring the right things in order for us to start changing how we apply our resources and how we decide what is a healthy, what is a happy community. Maryland is making some attempts actually to do that. They have what is that index called, Maryland? I forget. Yeah, do you want to talk? Do you know about it?
Oh, okay. Well, we're running out of time.
Well, check it out. Maryland has developed the genuine progress indicator, which is counter to GDP, which is typically used to measure progress within a community or a region. So
And
check it out.
Town has the Gross National Happiness Product.
Right. That's cool.
All about how you measure it.
Thank you very much to our panelists. If everyone would give them a round of applause. Thank you. Martha's going to come up.